You're listening to Digital Now, an original business and technology podcast by Logic 2020. I'm your host, Matt Treville. Each episode, I will be interviewing a new expert to learn more about industry trends, fascinating new tech, shifting customer expectations, and the steps every business can take to stay ahead. Today, we have a very special guest joining us on Digital Now, Nick Kelly, Director of Visual Analytics at Logic 2020 and overall analytics guru. Nick used to work in the UI and UX field, but moved to analytics over 10 years ago. You've worked across the globe from Singapore and the Philippines to Ireland to now the US. And actually, this is a pretty fun fact. You've had the opportunity to design dashboards for Formula One drivers. I definitely want to hear more about that. But anyway, Nick, thanks for joining us today. I'm very happy to have you here. I'm very excited to talk about data-driven culture. But first of all, how are you?
Thanks for having me, Matt. Doing great. Happy to be here. And it's been a fun journey. It's taken a long time. But yeah, really excited to be here talking to you and looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, I want to touch on this. 10 years ago, you were in visual analytics. I can't imagine there was much happening back then. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like then, and then we'll get into the now a little bit later on?
Yeah. It's a good point. It's been around. Like whenever I think I've been in it a while, there's always someone there who's been in it for 20 years, 30 years, and it's just been like they've seen it all before, and so quite often when I'm coming onto this stuff and I think I've found out something new, and it's like, yeah, no, so and so's been doing that for like the 1970s, and so for sure it seems like it's kind of new, but the whole reporting space has been around for ages, and but what I would say is when I got into it first, it was more definitely focused on the technology, that using the technology to solve our problems rather than the what we're going to be going into the cultural side of it, the people side of it. So to your point, there wasn't much going on the culture, but there was definitely lots going on the technology data side.
So let's start simply, if you don't mind, because I'm not the subject matter expert here and I need you to help me. So there's a lot of people that's probably listening to this that don't know a whole lot about data literacy, data culture. Can you just give us a simple overview of what that is and why they should care about it?
Yeah, for sure. And there is a fefew schools of thought out there. So the term was really popularized in the last few years by Jordan Morrow, and the idea is that we should be making our decisions based off data. And as as mundane as things as going to a meeting and using some form of data to support the decision making in a meeting, all the way up to, hey, how do we get our whole organization thinking about how they're going to leverage data? And it is a new term, but it has been around for quite a long time. But the great thing is there is more focus on it. And, we can probably get into it a bit later as well, but also Donald Farmer, talks about not using the term data literacy because, what if you tell someone, hey, you're not data literate? It doesn't sound great, right?
It
right? and so it can be offensive. So like the term is great, to describe like an organization and building up a culture around that. But to move on to that piece is like if you take data literacy and take it on a small scale and you blow it out to a whole organization, you can say, hey, look, let's have a data culture shift. And that really is does everyone seek to use data where appropriate, not all is appropriate, but where appropriate to support the organization and its goals. And so, just very broadly speaking, that's how I would call, the data literacy piece and the data culture part of it.
Well, data culture is what I want to talk about, actually, to start with. What challenges have you seen right now with building a data culture? So there's got to be some major issues that companies face when they're trying to change it. What are they?
Yeah, if we were to start with even think of something as tactical as the tools that are out there, let's say are, various technologies that people use for reporting and for dashboards. Are people using them? And so even a base level of culture as, are you using the available tools that are there? A lot of folks aren't. Then there's what data is available? Are people using that? And the first barrier to look at there is really, can people find it? Can people find and access the data they're looking for? So it's not even a case of people aren't making decisions using data. Probably many of them want to, but it's just not available in the form that they want to have it there. So I'd say that's probably the first problem we have is the availability of tools and the availability of data. Then there's the people side of it is, well, how do people discover and access data? And then on top of that is getting the willingness for people to do it. So there's many layers to it. Broadly speaking, I think, there's a technology problem and there's a people problem to that.
So essentially adoption, right? You're talking about with people, accepting it and saying, this is what we're using from now on. So my question on that is, if that's a huge part of the data-driven culture, does that come from top down or bottom up?
Ideally it's both. Ideally, we're going to be, having some executive level initiative that's going to have budget. It's going to have potentially even structural implications to, how we serve people within the organization with data, but also then the management level buy-in, as well as the folks that are basically making the decisions day to day. That we're arming everyone, top down, bottom up.
So what if you don't have leadership that has a data-driven mindset? What are the obstacles, or I guess, what would you suggest for folks that are looking to get leadership to buy in?
If you don't have the buy-in, we can go get those smaller wins, at a less executive level, and show the value. What happens when you do make more of these data-based decision-making? What happens? What's the implication? What's the win? How do we surface that to the executive? So establish quick wins. Now, again, none of this is new. This has been around for a long time, especially in the field of change management. Some of those tactics that would be used to get people on board and get people buy into, hey, look, there's something to this data culture thing, there's something to this data literacy thing. We've got a few wins we can reference. Let's go scale it.
On change management, right? Because that's, you spoke about adoption, you spoke about leadership. If it's coming from top down, you need good change management, right? So what is the importance of it, and sort of what tactics can you recommend for adoption of analytical assets?
Yeah, it's funny, even behind me here, there's working out of the office, you have the kids running around all over the place half the day, right?
Yeah.
And
welcome to 2020, mate.
And one of the things the kids do is we have them doing jitsu, and their trainer will set goals for them. And one thing we had was okay, look, we could have the kids kind of just do that kind of blindly and not really have the wider view of how they're doing towards their goal. What does it mean for them, right? All these things to help them track. And so, what we decided to do was okay, let's just put up a chart here on the whiteboard, right? And we'll have them participate in that, so that they would start coloring it in and fill up a bar the more they're completing the goals. And so they're going to see this visual representation of, hey, you know what? I'm tracking my data and I can be motivated by that. And at the top of the bar, we had a few things there. Okay, if you hit your goal, you're going to get to, you can get a new Nerf gun, right? You can pick your Nerf gun. You're going to have
That's awesome.
like a $30 budget to go buy your gun. So that was one thing. It was just showing, how to motivate and get that change going with the kids, but also then to surface the importance of tracking data. We had them fill out an Excel spreadsheet. Every time they did a few arm bars, they type it in, and that spreadsheet would then tell them, okay, you've got this many arm bars left for the end of the month, but also here's how many you would need to do every day to hit your goal. So they're kind of getting really, really focused on that. So that helped them determine, hey, tomorrow I need to do this. So maybe tomorrow I need to get up early in the morning and structure my day a little bit. So that sort of even that minor amount of data was helping have some change impact just at home.
I'd say that's a lot clearer on how they're doing than when I would come home with a test with an F that looked more like an A by the time I got home. I'd say it's hard for the kid to argue, their results when it's data driven. I'd say.
That's right, yeah. It's kind of unfair,
And
I
then
suppose.
the other part of that is, how old are your kids?
4 and 6.
If you can get them to adopt, Power BI reports and things like that, I would challenge that you could get anyone to adopt it. But you're right. It's putting the right meaning behind it. It's they have to understand why they're doing it and what the value is on the other end, right?
It's spot on, and that's like change management 101. What's in it for me?
Yeah,
It totally is, right?
Yeah.
In some regards, yeah, like it's a victory to get kids using data, but in others, they don't have any energy behind it, like in terms of negativity, right? They don't have any resistance behind it. If I want to do something new, I really have to I have to make fanfare about it. And
Of course,
and it has to be really super clear to you. It's like, hey Matt, this is different. It's not business as usual. We're completely changing things up here, and this is how. And Matt, we'd love your input on how to do that. Like, let's put our heads together and figure this thing out, because we're going to be part of the solution here, and that's really all the good change management stuff. It's like it's being transparent, it's getting the buy-in, and it's working together. There's some of the things like that really blew my mind in analytics, and the impact you can have is just looking at change management methodologies that are out there, and so there's lots to learn. There's lots to learn.
Well, I want to continue on that vein, but I have to ask you first: how many arm bars did you cop from your kids during this experiment?
Yeah, most of them. I'd say I had about 8,000 on me.
Okay.
But about halfway through it, I thought, you know what, I should buy a jiu-jitsu dummy. And so we did, and that promptly had its arm almost ripped off after about 2,000 arm bars.
So, sorry, back on topic. We were talking about change management, and I want to get your perspective on how that has changed over the years within analytics in an enterprise setting.
You know what? I think a good proxy for that, Matt, is like seeing what's going on LinkedIn and people's reaction to change management analytics. Let's say even, okay, you started off by saying, what was analytics and where was it at 10 years ago? If I had started talking about change management back then, no one would have given me any attention, really. They wouldn't have given me the time of day. And just because where the focus was on data, it was on data quality, it was on the technology, it was like, how do you architect your data warehouse? All important things, like no question. Really, really important. It was when people moved past that and started to realize, hey, look, we've got this stuff set up, but people still aren't really acting on data. So why is that? We've done what we think we should have done. So that piece where we are in the enterprise now, I think we're starting to realize that we need to focus more on people.
I have to jump all over that when it comes to prioritizing people. Coming from a team sports background, there's nothing more important. Everyone has to be on the same page, going in the same direction. So I like that one a lot, mate. So I want to shift gears a little bit, okay? I know the people are the most important, but we have to talk about tools, right? And you've said they've come a long way, and they were initially the focus in this arena. But what are the key tools you think that every organization should have in order to best organize and visualize their analytics assets?
I think even 2 or 3 years ago, you wouldn't have caught me talking about tooling very much. And I think it has come full circle with, there are a few things that are indispensable, probably because of a proliferation of tooling. So, if we look out there and we say, okay, look, and take any company, let's say, enterprise level, fairly large organization. And probably what's happened over time is they've ended up having their departments adopting different BI tools and BI technologies. And to throw out a few names, marketing might be using Tableau, the sales team maybe is using ClickSense, and let's say the IT organization is using Power BI to visualize their data. And so the challenge there is, do we try and mandate a certain technology, which may work, but it's going to take fairly big structural change within the organization to make that work. Or do we go say, accept that there will always be technology silos within the enterprise, and figure out, okay, we're going to go with it. We're not going to change that, but let's put a layer on top. Let's put a technology layer on top of all of that. And so, if there's one technology out there that I think has the biggest impact, especially in relation to change management and adoption, it's analytics hubs. Like it, by far.
Mate, I've been hearing the term analytics hub everywhere. It's all over LinkedIn. And obviously this is why, right? It's become a focus point now and people are very interested in it, seems like. Because it's a powerful tool, right? So it's something that everyone, should have. Not everyone does have. But it's only good if people actually use it, right? So we're back to this adoption sort of situation. So do you have any tips and tricks for increasing adoption? Because like any tool that you implement, it has to be adopted, right? So yeah. I think that's an important thing for people listening to understand.
Totally. And you just reminded me of it. Like it's so easy to forget. It's like, hey, technology is going to solve all our problems, and it's like that's kind of what got us into this situation. And so you're spot on. I think any technology implementation has to come with a change management approach. And I think it's nearly a waste of time to do it without it. And it's not any different for the analytics hubs. And so if we haven't done all of those, the change management aspects of it, like just letting people know that it's there, how did they find it? How do they access it? Have we set up the permissions correctly? And even getting to the level of, have we defined the taxonomy? Like, we're totally familiar. It's like second nature to us when we go on to something like, let's say, Netflix. And we go to Netflix and we say, look, I want to just see any comedy. And so, that's a taxonomy. Like the comedy, there you go. Our action and adventure, like all of those things. We need those in the enterprise space for our analytics hub. So how do I enable discovery and help people find things? So there'd be the things I'd be looking at, but for sure we would need a fairly comprehensive change management program. We don't want the hub just to be another piece of technology that's thrown on the top. That's another thing people have to worry about.
Yeah, and it sounds like simplicity of use, is a big part of it too, right?
Oh, spot on. The desire is to expose data and potentially the complexity behind it, and not like out of there's no ill will behind that, but just to give all of that power to the end user. But the end user might be overwhelmed by it. So absolutely, like simplicity is going to be really, really important in approaching this. Okay,
so we talked about data literacy at the start. What role does it play in creating a data-driven organization?
It could be your start. It could be the genesis for how we might build up a more data-driven organization. In the past, and when we looked at this without the data literacy piece, it would always start with some level of assessment, where you would go, where are the people right now in terms of analytical maturity? And now we can look at it in terms of where is our organization in terms of data literacy? And that can be a really, really good place to start, because we might say, look, the CEO is not data literate. Right, we wouldn't say it to the CEO's face, right?
Yeah.
And that's going back to that thing. It can be offensive, right? But
of course, yeah.
Yeah, if we say, well, we don't necessarily have the buy-in from the CEO, so let's look at that as a gap. So that is a gap. It's an opportunity to educate, and then look in the rest of the other pockets of the organization to say, well, maybe it's good to start with the most data literate group. We can get better wins there. There's less convincing to be done there. And then use them as a stepping stone to show, hey, look at the sales team. They've really, really embraced this data-driven culture piece here. Look, they've got great dashboards. They've really built trust with their data, and they're making decisions with it. And they've had this, 50% increase in productivity, or their sales are up 20% because of it, or whatever criteria or metrics we can get there to help sell another department and then the wider organization beyond. So I think that's one way. There are many, but that is one way you could certainly approach building a data-driven culture. Now,
yeah, and that's my next question actually. is practical steps that companies can take so that their employees can start, adopting data literacy. Do you have any tips around that?
Yeah, so if you do I mentioned the assessment, right? Start with the assessment. You have to start there anyway. But if it's in a small group, it's much easier to do. It's much more, you can tackle that. That's something you can take on. And then develop this thing called a change plan. So what is our plan? How, understanding that people are really going to be key to making any of this stuff work. How are we going to communicate with folks to address the gaps that are there, any potential risks, and then start to look for, there's plenty of processes out there that you could follow. Like there is change management process out there. There's user experience process. There's all these different processes that you can start to leverage. And then look to do small baby steps, small iterations. Like we're not going to boil the ocean. You have to get these small little quick wins along the way, right? So don't focus on grand change. That will come. But if you focus on the small wins, then it's much easier to get the buy-in. And then also focusing on the education piece. So like doing brown bags, doing different sessions where you can invite people, maybe even internal webinars, internal workshops where you can get people on board. It is very hands-on and does require quite a bit of effort, but the reward is absolutely worth it.
Yeah, and I think what you're alluding to is people first, right? And let's stay on the working from home situation. Obviously, tools, changes, all these things that are coming into workplaces when you're at home, it's different to the office, right? So, are these tactics transferable to the at-home workplace? Because when you're in the office and your manager or your leader is saying, we're going to do this and et cetera, it's different over a video call, so are they transferable?
Yeah, I know. And, we've been doing workshops recently remotely, and not out of a desire to do them remotely. It's like, obviously we're forced to do it because of COVID, right? And I never would have seen myself doing remote workshops. I would have, anytime we do workshop, it has to be in person. I have to see people's reaction. I have to read the body language. We need people around a whiteboard, using sticky notes and all these things, right? And then COVID came along, and it's like, like if you want to function,
nope.
Yeah, you got to do it. You got to use the remote world, and so that was certainly a big shift. But some of the tools then that help with that, like when people are at home, and they are, not having the physical experience that they would have had in the past, where they're able to interact with the whiteboards and various things like that, or just show up in meetings and read body language. As simple as that is. What I have noticed is useful is like I end up using virtual whiteboards a whole lot more, and something I would have avoided in the past. Is it as good as doing a whiteboard in person? Look, for me, it's not, but it is way better than just a regular video call. Way, way, way better. So I have that interaction. So that's one piece that I've noticed is a difference. But also then on the to go back to the Analytics Hub, having that element of being able to collaborate, being able to give ratings, that makes the remote world more manageable for sure. And I would even say in aspects preferable, in terms of productivity and in terms of just being able to have the time to find the things you need to find, and a hub being able to enable that and unlock that for people.
Well, that was going to be my next question. It sounds like you just answered it. What's the most important thing, or where should people be focusing on for the rest of 2020 into 2021, to make sure they have a data-driven culture? You've mentioned tools, training, change management, but is it the Analytics Hub that's probably the most important?
Yeah, I think there's one thing that we could tangibly put our finger on. It's Analytics Hubs. Just because, not in and of itself that it's a solution, but it can be a vehicle for the solution. Let's say you've got your change management program. You can surface all of those materials and the training on a hub. You can drive the data culture through a hub. The hub is going to be a big focus, certainly towards the end of the year, but I think then going forward, 2021, certainly it's a trend.
Okay, well, mate, that's time for us today. I've really appreciated this chat. I really think it's an important topic right now, and just appreciate your subject matter expertise and the way you were able to simplify it for me. personally, I appreciate that. I hope people listening appreciate that too. So thanks again.
Yeah, Matt, thanks a lot. Really appreciated it and enjoyed the conversation.
No worries, mate. Speak to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Logic 2020's podcast, Digital Now. To learn more, visit our website at logic2020.com or follow us on social media. See you next time.